The Lycan king saved her from the ritual, but demanded a debt no Omega could pay. Every leaf, every branch seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something terrible. In the center of the village square, a crowd had gathered, faces hidden beneath dark hoods, hands trembling with excitement and fear. Torches flickered, casting jagged shadows that danced across the cobblestones. At the center of it all stood Alara, the Omega of the village. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum. She had grown up knowing this day might come. Her mother had warned her of the ancient pact, the debt all Omegas owed to the forces that ruled this land. But no warning could prepare her for the reality of standing in the cold, knowing the ritual would decide her fate. The village elders began to chant in a language older than memory, their voices rising and falling like waves. The air grew heavy, charged with a strange, almost electric power. Alara felt it crawl over her skin, a shiver that was both terrifying and magnetic. Her feet were bound by thin, enchanted ropes, preventing her from fleeing. She wanted to scream, to run, to throw herself into the forest, but her body betrayed her. She could not move. Then, from the shadows at the edge of the square, came a sound that made the crowd freeze. A low, resonant growl that seemed to shake the air itself. The elders faltered mid-chant, glancing nervously toward the trees. The fog swirled, parting as if some invisible hand had pushed it aside. And then he appeared, Kale, the Lycan king. He stepped into the torchlight, a figure of legend come to life. His eyes glowed with a strange silver light, sharp and commanding. Muscles coiled beneath dark fur, and his presence alone seemed to bend the air around him. The villagers whispered in fear and awe. No one had seen him in decades. Some said he had disappeared into the mountains, a creature of myth and nightmares. But here he was, alive, unstoppable, and very real. Kale's gaze locked on Alara, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink. Time slowed. Her fear did not fade, it grew, mingling with something else she could not name. There was power in him, yes, but also a strange protection, a promise that she might survive the night. The elders lifted their arms to continue the chant, but Kale moved with the speed of a shadow. In a blur he struck, his claws and strength precise and controlled. One by one the ritualists fell, their spells shattered, their power no match for him. The crowd screamed, some in terror, some in awe, as the Lycan king claimed the square. Alara felt her rope snap as if cut by invisible blades. Kale moved toward her, each step measured, deliberate. When he reached her, he crouched low, his massive form almost shielding her from the remnants of the ritual. "You are mine now," he said, his voice low and rumbling. "And you will live, but do not think freedom comes without cost." Alara swallowed hard, her throat dry. What do you mean?" she whispered. "The debt you carry," Kale said, his silver eyes piercing hers. "It has existed before you were born. You cannot pay it as others have tried, but I will ensure you survive it for now." Her heart pounded. Survival was a gift, yes, but the price was unknown. And yet, in the depths of her fear, a spark of trust flickered. He had saved her when no one else could. He had stopped the ritualists when all hope had been lost. Kale rose, towering over her, and swept his gaze across the frightened villagers. "Leave this place. Return to your homes. Speak of nothing you have seen, or you will wish you had died in the fog." His words were sharp, final, and absolute. The villagers obeyed immediately, scattering into the mist. Only Alara remained, rooted by a mixture of awe and fear. Kale extended a hand, enormous yet gentle. Hesitantly she placed hers in his, feeling warmth spread from his touch. "You will come with me," he said. "There is much you must learn before the debt is called upon, and there are enemies who will not forgive your survival." Alara nodded, trembling, yet strangely relieved. She did not know what awaited her, but anything was better than the ritual she had narrowly escaped. The journey through the forest was silent, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves beneath Kale's massive steps. Alara struggled to keep pace, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering figure of the Lycan king. Shadows danced around them, the forest alive with unseen eyes. Alara realized the stories had been true. The woods themselves were not safe. Magic lingered here, old and unpredictable, and Kale's presence was the only thing keeping it at bay. After hours of walking, they reached a cliff that overlooked the kingdom. The moon, now free of clouds, cast silver light on Kale's fur, making him look both terrifying and beautiful. The castle below rose from the cliffs, dark stone towers crowned with banners that fluttered in the cold wind. "You will live in my halls," Kale said, his voice softer now, almost intimate. "You will learn to control the power within you, and you will understand what it means to owe a debt no one can pay." Alara stared down at the castle, a mixture of fear and wonder in her heart. She had never imagined such a place existed, a world ruled by beings far older and stronger than any human, and she was to live among them. As they approached the gates, Kale stopped suddenly. His ears twitched, his body rigid. The forest behind them shifted, shadows moving unnaturally. Alara felt a chill crawl over her skin. "Something follows," Kale growled, his hand on the hilt of a massive sword. "They seek you, Omega. They will not rest until the debt is claimed. And they will not care if you live or die in the process." Alara's breath caught in her throat. Who are they?" Kale's eyes darkened. "Those who believe they can control fate, those who wish to see the past repeated. They will not understand mercy. And neither will I if they harm you." The gates opened before them, creaking like the groan of an ancient beast. Inside, torches lit grand halls, and the air smelled of old stone, wild herbs, and the faint tang of iron. Kale led her through corridors filled with shadows and history, every step echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. Finally, they reached a chamber at the heart of the castle. The walls were carved with ancient runes that glowed faintly under the moonlight. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting flickering light on Kale's sharp features. "You will stay here," Kale said, motioning to a small bed and a wardrobe carved from dark wood. "Eat, rest. Tomorrow your training begins. There is no escape from the debt, only understanding. And survival." Alara sank onto the bed, her mind racing. The fear had not left her, it had deepened. But beneath it, a strange thread of determination wove through her thoughts. She had survived the ritual. She had been saved by a being stronger and wiser than any human. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could face what came next. Kale lingered at the doorway, his silhouette outlined by the moonlight. "Do not think of me as cruel," he said softly. "I only ensure the survival of what matters, even if it is yours. You belong to no one, yet you owe your life to me. Remember that." With that, he vanished into the shadows, leaving Alara alone with the firelight and the weight of her new reality. Her heartbeat slowly steadied, but the tension in her chest remained, a constant reminder that survival had a price no Omega could ever fully repay. Outside, the wind howled, carrying whispers of the forest and echoes of the ritual. Inside, Alara stared into the flames, wondering if she could endure the days to come, if she could face a debt that seemed impossible to pay, and if the Lycan king who saved her would ever see her as more than what she owed. Her eyes closed, but sleep did not come easily. The moonlight touched the edges of her vision, and she dreamed of silver eyes in the darkness, of claws and power, and of a debt she had yet to understand. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that her life, and perhaps her heart, was no longer entirely her own. And in the shadows, Kale watched from a distant balcony, silent and unreadable, ensuring the Omega he had claimed survived the night, knowing that the debt he demanded would test her in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The night deepened, thick with magic, power, and the promise of trials to come. The ritual was over, but the story of Alara and the Lycan king had only just begun. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kale's castle, painting the stone floors with pale gold. Alara awoke on the bed he had provided, muscles stiff from the cold night. The fire had died down, leaving only the soft glow of sunlight creeping across the room. She rubbed her arms, still trembling from the events of the previous night. The ritual, the fog, the growl that had signaled Kale's arrival, it all felt like a distant dream. But the tether around her wrist, faintly glowing with enchanted light, reminded her that it was very real. She owed him. She could not escape. A soft knock echoed from the doorway. "Alara," Kale's deep voice rumbled, "it is time to begin." She swallowed hard, heart thumping. She had no idea what training with the Lycan King would mean. Would it be harsh, painful, dangerous? Yet despite her fear, she felt a strange pull, an unspoken promise of safety and power beneath the warning of the debt she carried. Kale stepped inside, his silver eyes fixed on her. He was a mountain of strength and authority, but there was a subtle softness in the way he looked at her, a measure of respect hidden beneath the power. He offered a hand, not for obedience but for guidance. Hesitantly she took it, feeling warmth spread through her fingers, an odd reassurance amid the unknown. "You must understand," he said, his voice low. "The world you live in is far more dangerous than your village. You are almost consumed by forces you cannot yet comprehend. And you carry something inside you, something that may awaken at any moment. My duty is to help you control it. Your survival depends on it." Alara nodded, though words failed her. Fear and curiosity churned in her chest. She felt small beside him, but at the same time, she sensed a new strength stirring within her. Kale led her through the corridors of the castle, their footsteps echoing softly. The walls were lined with tapestries depicting Lycan warriors and ancient battles. Each image seemed alive, as if the painted figures might step down at any moment. Magic hummed faintly in the air, a constant, invisible presence. Alara realized that the castle itself was a living witness to centuries of power and struggle. They arrived at a courtyard surrounded by high walls. The moonlight had faded, but the silver shimmer of enchanted stones embedded in the ground still glowed faintly. Kale gestured toward the open space. "Today, you learn to move as one with the power inside you," he said. "You will not be helpless, you will not be prey. You will survive, and you will learn to wield what is within you." Alara's chest tightened. She had never imagined herself powerful, never believed she could defend herself against the dark forces that had once tried to claim her life. But Kale's presence was a steady anchor. The fear was still there, yes, but it mixed with a strange thrill, a spark of courage. The first lessons were simple: balance, awareness, and listening to the environment. Kale moved beside her, a shadow of immense presence guiding her every step. She stumbled, fell, and rose again, sweat dampening her hair, muscles aching, but the determination in her chest grew. "You are stronger than you think," Kale said, watching her closely. "But strength alone is not enough. Control, patience, and understanding your own fears, that is what will save you." As the day passed, the lessons became more intense. Kale introduced her to the subtle ways of sensing danger, recognizing magical traces, and navigating the forest beyond the castle without being seen. He taught her to hear the whispers of the wind, to notice the shifts in shadow, and to feel the pulse of life around her. Every skill was a thread, weaving her closer to the power that had been her curse. Yet, the deeper lessons were harder. Kale forced her to confront her fear of the dead itself, the idea that survival came with a cost she could not imagine paying. He would not allow her to shrink from it, would not permit her to pretend the chains of fate did not exist. "Do not run from the truth," he said one evening, the firelight flickering over his stern features. "The debt is real, you cannot hide from it. But how you face it, that will define you." Alara shivered, not from cold but from the weight of his words. She had always believed survival meant hiding, avoiding danger, doing what others demanded. But here, under the silver gaze of the Lycan King, she learned that survival required courage, understanding, and sometimes embracing the impossible. Days passed and the lessons shaped her. She became more aware, more precise, and more attuned to the forces around her. Kale pushed her to her limits, but always with a purpose. And somewhere between fear and exhaustion, Alara began to feel another, quieter thread stirring, something she did not fully understand. It was in the way Kale's presence commanded the room, yet left space for her own decisions. It was in the rare moments when he offered guidance instead of order, when his gaze lingered not in judgment, but in careful attention. She could not name it, and she tried not to think about it. But it was there, a quiet, dangerous longing she did not dare acknowledge. One night, under a sky washed in silver moonlight, Kale took her to the castle balcony overlooking the forest. The wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, and the stars shimmered like distant fire. "Why do you care for me?" Alara asked quietly, almost afraid of her own question. Kale's eyes reflected the moonlight, bright and steady. "Care is not a weakness," he said. "It is a recognition of value. You survived the ritual. That proves more than any strength test. You have value, Alara. That is why I protect you. That is why I train you. Do not mistake it for anything less." Alara nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She did not fully understand him, did not fully trust him, but she did not fear him as she had at first. His power was undeniable, yet it did not terrify her in the way the ritual had. Days turned into weeks. Alara grew stronger, faster, and more aware of her surroundings. She learned to run through forests without leaving a trace, to sense shifts in the air, and to feel the pulse of magic in the land. Kale's training was relentless, yet every skill she acquired made her more confident, more alive, and more certain that she could face the debt she had once feared would destroy her. Yet there were moments when the past crept in, shadows that neither skill nor strength could erase. She dreamed of the ritualists, their chanting voices echoing in her mind, the cold hands that had sought to claim her. And in those dreams, Kale was always there, sometimes comforting, sometimes distant, always a reminder of the debt she carried. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Kale brought her to the edge of the forest. A strange tension hung in the air, heavier than any lesson, heavier than any fear. "There are forces that do not forgive," Kale said, his gaze fixed on the distant trees. "You survived the ritual, yes, but others will not accept that. You must be ready for them." Alara's stomach tightened. "I thought the ritual was over. I thought I was safe." "Safety is a choice," Kale replied, his voice low and fierce. "And sometimes the world does not allow it. That is why you must be strong. That is why you must understand the debt you carry, not as punishment but as preparation. You will face enemies who see only the value of what you owe, and they will not hesitate to take it." Alara nodded, her resolve hardening. Fear still lingered, but it was tempered by understanding. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been dragged to the ritual square. She was learning to become someone who could face impossible odds, who could stand beside the Lycan king and survive. As they returned to the castle, Kale's hand brushed hers, briefly, almost accidentally, yet intentionally enough to send a shiver through her. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the lessons and the growing strength within her. But she could not deny the stir of emotion that rose, complicated and dangerous, intertwining with respect and awe. The castle walls seemed alive that night, shadows flickering in rhythm with the firelight. Alara lay awake, thinking of the debt, of Kale, and of the strange power growing inside her. She did not yet understand it fully, but she sensed that it would define her future and her relationship with the Lycan king. From the balcony, Kale watched her silently, knowing that each lesson, each challenge, and each step she took was bringing them both closer to a bond neither of them fully understood. He sensed the shift in her, the awakening of strength, courage, and something more delicate yet powerful, trust. And in the quiet night, as the stars burned bright above the castle, both of them understood a truth neither spoke aloud. The debt was real, unavoidable and impossible to repay fully. But survival, power, and perhaps even connection could bloom in its shadow if they could endure the trials ahead. The forest whispered, the castle hummed with ancient magic, and the silver moon watched silently. The lessons were only beginning, the bond only forming, and the debt, looming, inevitable, and consuming, would soon demand attention neither Alara nor Kale could ignore. And in that silence beneath the endless sky, Alara realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. She was no longer the helpless girl of the ritual square. She was becoming something new, stronger, sharper, alive in ways she had never imagined. And the Lycan king, fearsome and commanding, would be there every step of the way. Her heart raced with fear, anticipation, and something she could not yet name. The debt was coming. The trials were coming. And the bond with the Lycan king was growing, like a shadow stretching beneath the silver light of the moon. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in days she felt a spark of hope. Not freedom, not yet, but strength. And perhaps in the midst of fear and debt, the possibility of trust and more. The forest beyond the castle was alive with shadows and whispers. Alara had grown stronger under Kale's guidance, yet even now, each step she took felt heavy with expectation. The magical tether around her wrist glowed faintly, a constant reminder of the debt she owed and the power she carried inside. She had learned to move with grace and awareness, but she still felt small beside the towering Lycan king. Kale led her deeper into the woods than they had ever ventured before. The air was colder here, the trees older, their twisted branches reaching skyward like gnarled fingers. Shadows shifted unnaturally, as if the forest itself were watching them. "You must understand," Kale said, his voice low and steady, "there are forces that do not forgive. You survived the ritual, but that does not mean the danger is over." Alara nodded. Her heart still raced at the memory of that night, the ritualist's chants, the fear that had frozen her in place, and Kale's sudden arrival. She had thought she was safe, but now she realized the world beyond her village was far more dangerous than she had imagined. "Why do they want me?" she asked quietly, her voice almost lost among the rustling leaves. Kale's eyes darkened, silver gleaming in the dim light. "Because of what you carry. Your survival is a threat to those who wish to control fate. They see only the debt, not the person. And they will not hesitate to take it." The words chilled her, but she forced herself to keep walking. She had grown stronger, yes, but the thought of enemies lurking in the shadows was still terrifying. And yet, beneath the fear, a spark of determination burned. She would not be helpless again. She would not allow herself to be used as a pawn. As they reached the ruins of an ancient temple, Kale stopped. The stones were blackened with age, covered in moss and runes that pulsed faintly with old magic. A chill ran down Alara's spine. She had never seen anything like it. "This place holds secrets," Kale said, stepping carefully among the broken stones. "Secrets that even I must respect, but you must learn them. They will teach you about the power inside you and the curse that threatens it." Alara followed, her eyes wide as she traced the glowing runes with her fingers. The symbols seemed to hum, vibrating in rhythm with the beating of her heart. She felt the energy inside her stir, responding to the magic around her. Kale watched her closely. "Do not be afraid of what you feel. The power inside you is part of who you are, but it is dangerous. If left unchecked, it could consume you and those you care for." Alara nodded, trying to understand. She had always believed her survival was enough, that escaping the ritual meant she was free. But now she realized freedom was more complicated. Survival was only the beginning. The debt, the power, the curse, they were all intertwined, and she would need to face them if she wanted to endure. They spent hours in the temple ruins, Kale guiding her through exercises to sense the flow of magic, to feel the forest and the stones as extensions of herself. Each lesson was exhausting, yet exhilarating. She could feel herself growing stronger, more attuned, more aware of the forces that surrounded her. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruins, Kale's expression darkened. "There is something you must know," he said. "Something I have not told you before." Alara's stomach tightened. "What is it?" Kale hesitated, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features. "Centuries ago, my mate was sacrificed in a ritual much like the one you survived. I swore never to allow it again. That is why I saved you. But it also means the debt you owe is not just survival. It is tied to the curse that haunts my bloodline, and to the enemies who will seek to claim you for their own." Alara's breath caught. She had sensed a weight in Kale, a shadow in his eyes, but she had never understood its origin. Now the truth was clear. He was not merely a king, not merely a protector. He was a man shaped by loss, by betrayal, by centuries of power and pain. "And the curse?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's eyes softened. "It is old and it is strong. It feeds on fear and weakness. It will test you, Alara. It will tempt you to give in to what is easiest, what is safe. But you must resist. Only by facing it fully can you hope to survive, and perhaps even find a way to change it." The forest seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper, as if responding to his words. Alara felt a shiver run through her, but she nodded. She did not fully understand what lay ahead, but she trusted Kale enough to try. They returned to the castle as night fell. The corridors seemed darker than usual, the flickering torches casting long, uncertain shadows. Kale led her to a chamber near the heart of the castle, where the walls were lined with books, scrolls, and ancient artifacts. "This is where you will study," he said. "Not only to survive, but to understand. Knowledge is as important as strength. And the more you understand, the better you can control the power within you." Alara sat at a heavy wooden desk, the weight of centuries pressing down upon her. She opened a book, the pages filled with symbols she had never seen before. Kale watched her, silent and patient, letting her struggle, letting her learn. Days turned into weeks. Alara studied under Kale's watchful eye, learning the history of the Lycan clan, the nature of the curse, and the ancient magic that shaped their world. She grew stronger, more confident, more aware of the forces at play. But with knowledge came fear. She learned that enemies were already moving against them, secret plots forming in shadows. The debt she owed was not just a formality, it was a lure drawing danger toward them both. One evening, as she practiced sensing the magic around her, a shadow moved across the walls. Alara froze, heart racing. Kale appeared beside her instantly, his presence a shield against whatever threat lingered in the darkness. "They are close," he murmured. "Someone seeks to claim you, and they will not stop until they succeed." Alara's hands trembled, but she forced herself to stand tall. "Then I will not let them," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that churned inside her. Kale's eyes softened, a faint smile touching his lips. "Good. That is the spirit that will keep you alive. But remember, strength alone is not enough. You must use your mind, your senses, and your heart. Only then will you survive." That night, sleep did not come easily. Alara dreamed of the ritualists, of shadows that moved without form, and of a silver-eyed figure standing over her, both protector and master. The dream was vivid, almost real, and she awoke with a start, feeling the pulse of magic within her thrumming like a drum. Kale found her in the chamber, the first light of dawn breaking through the windows. "You are ready," he said simply. "Ready to face more than training. Ready to confront what lies ahead. The curse will test you, but it will not define you. Only your choices will." Alara nodded, though doubt lingered. She had grown stronger, yes, but the thought of facing the curse, the enemies, and the debt weighed heavily on her. She had survived the ritual, she had endured Kale's lessons, and she had learned to trust herself in ways she never imagined. But now the true challenge loomed, surviving the unseen threats that moved like shadows across their world. Days later, Kale led her to the castle's highest tower, where the view of the surrounding lands was breathtaking. The forest stretched endlessly, silvered by the light of a rising moon. Kale's expression was unreadable, but his gaze was steady, fixed on the horizon. "Look there," he said. "Beyond the forest, beyond the hills, there are those who would see you claimed, who would see the debt you owe used against us. You must be ready. And more than that, you must understand what it means to fight for yourself, and for those you care about." Alara studied the horizon, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She was no longer the frightened girl dragged to a ritual square. She was becoming a force in her own right, capable of confronting both the curse and the enemies that sought her. But as the wind whispered through the tower, carrying voices of the past and hints of danger yet to come, Alara realized the truth. Survival alone would not be enough. The debt she carried, the bond with Kale, and the curse that haunted both their lives would demand courage, wisdom, and sacrifice she had never imagined. And then a sound, a distant, echoing howl, full of malice and intent, reached their ears. Alara's heart leapt. She turned to Kale, silver eyes wide. "They are coming," he said, his jaw tight, muscles coiled. "And this time the shadows will not wait. The debt you owe will be tested, and the curse will awaken fully." Alara swallowed hard, feeling fear, anticipation, and a strange spark of resolve ignite within her. She had survived the ritual, she had grown under Kale's guidance, and she had faced her first true lessons in the power she carried. But now the real challenge began, and neither she nor Kale could predict how it would change them both. The moon rose higher, bathing the castle and forest in silver light. Shadows twisted in the trees below. The stage was set for the next trial, and Alara knew in her heart that she could not turn back. Survival had been only the first step. The debt, the curse, and the enemies were coming, and she would face them, with Kale at her side, or fall trying. The castle was silent under the blood-red moon. Shadows stretched across the halls like living things, twisting and moving with a life of their own. Alara stood at the top of the highest tower, the wind tugging at her hair and the folds of her cloak. She had grown stronger, faster, and more aware since the ritual, but tonight she knew the true test would come. Kale approached silently, his presence both comforting and commanding. He did not speak, only placed a hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch reminded her of the nights they had trained together, of the lessons in control, courage, and understanding. It also reminded her of the debt she owed, a debt that had been part of her since birth and part of Kale's life for centuries. "They are here," Kale said quietly, his silver eyes scanning the forest below. "The ones who want to claim you. They have waited for this night." Alara nodded. Fear still pulsed through her veins, but it was tempered by the strength she had gained. She no longer trembled like the frightened girl at the ritual. She had been trained, tested, and awakened to the power within her. And she knew that whatever came, she would face it, not as a victim but as a force in her own right. The howl came first, a low, chilling sound that echoed through the forest. Then more, a chorus of shadows moving like water toward the castle. Figures emerged, cloaked and armed, their intent clear. They had come for her to claim the debt that bound her to Kale, and they would not stop until they succeeded. Kale's stance shifted, his body coiling with power. "Stay close," he commanded. "Trust yourself, trust me. And remember what you have learned." Alara tightened her grip on the hilt of the short sword Kale had given her. She could feel the energy within her, the pulse of magic that had grown stronger with each lesson, each trial, each step she had taken with the Lycan king. Her heart raced, but she did not falter. The attackers reached the castle gates, but Kale's roar shook the air. Shadows twisted around him, a protective barrier of raw, untamed energy. Alara felt it surge through her as well, a reminder that she was no longer just an Omega, powerless and frightened. She was alive, strong, and ready. The battle began with a clash of light and shadow. The attackers were skilled, but Kale and Alara moved as one. His strength and her awareness, his experience and her speed, combined into a force that the enemy could not anticipate. Alara felt her own power awakening fully, a blend of magic and instinct that allowed her to anticipate movements, sense danger, and respond before the threat fully arrived. But the attackers were relentless. They pressed forward, a wave of shadows and intent that threatened to overwhelm them. Alara's chest tightened with the weight of the debt, the curse, and the responsibility she carried. And then she remembered Kale's words, "Strength alone is not enough. Use your mind, your senses, your heart." She took a deep breath, centering herself. The magic inside her responded, flowing through her like silver fire. The shadows around the castle shifted in response, bending to her will, forming barriers and pathways that gave them the advantage. She moved with precision, striking when necessary, defending when required, her fear transformed into focused power. Kale watched her, pride hidden beneath his stoic expression. He had trained her, tested her, and pushed her to her limits. Now she was ready, not just to survive, but to confront the curse and the debt that had haunted both their lives. The battle reached its peak at the main courtyard. Shadows surged, tendrils of darkness seeking to claim them both. Kale roared, and the force of his power clashed with the attackers in a storm of energy. Alara stepped forward, her own magic intertwining with his, forming a bond of strength and trust. Together, they became a force neither enemy nor curse could overcome. But then, a surge of the ancient curse struck. Alara felt it coil around her, threatening to overwhelm her mind and body. Her vision blurred and fear clawed at her resolve. She stumbled, nearly falling to her knees, and the attackers seized the moment, pressing closer. Kale reached for her, his hand steady and firm. "You are stronger than this," he growled. "Remember who you are, remember what you have learned. Fight, Alara, fight with everything you are." Alara took a deep, shuddering breath. She remembered the lessons, the nights of training, the moments of doubt and growth. She focused, letting the magic inside her flow freely, not as a weapon but as an extension of herself. The curse struck again, but this time she met it head-on. Light and shadow collided, twisting around her as she pushed back. The energy of the curse met the power of her will, and slowly, steadily, she took control. She felt the pulse of magic in her veins, the tether that had bound her, and realized that she was not a pawn. She was not helpless. She was capable of shaping her own fate. Kale's presence beside her strengthened her further. They moved as one, their powers intertwined, and the attackers could not withstand the combined force. Shadows scattered, tendrils of darkness retreating in the face of their united strength. The courtyard fell silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of the two who had survived. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. "You faced the curse and you survived. Not because I saved you, but because you fought, because you are strong." Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from relief and recognition. She had faced the impossible and endured. She had confronted the debt, the curse, and the darkness, and she had not broken. Kale helped her to her feet, his silver eyes softer now, almost tender. "The debt is real," he said. "It will always be part of you. But survival, courage, and the choices you make define what that debt truly means. You are no longer just an Omega. You are someone who can face the world and shape it in your own way." Alara looked at him, her chest swelling with a mixture of gratitude, awe, and something deeper she could not yet name. I could not have done this without you," she whispered. Kale shook his head. "No. You did this yourself. I only guided you. The strength was always yours. The choice was always yours. And now you are free to decide what that means, not just for survival, but for life." The first light of dawn began to touch the castle, casting long shadows and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The threat of the attackers had passed, the curse had been confronted, and the castle, silent, ancient, and alive with magic, stood as a testament to their endurance. Alara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The debt had not disappeared, the curse had not vanished, but she had faced them both and survived. She was no longer the frightened girl dragged to a ritual square. She was a survivor, a fighter, and someone capable of shaping her own destiny. Kale watched her, his expression unreadable yet full of respect. The debt you owe is yours to carry, but you do not carry it alone, and you do not carry it as a victim. You carry it as someone who survived, who endured, and who chose to rise above it. Alara nodded, understanding the truth in his words. The debt was part of her, yes, but it did not define her. It had shaped her, tested her, and strengthened her, but it was her choices and her courage that truly mattered. As they stood together on the castle balcony, watching the sun rise over the forests and mountains beyond, Alara realized the bond between them had changed. It was no longer fear, obligation, or survival. It was trust, respect, and a connection forged through trials, danger, and shared endurance. Kale's hand brushed hers, this time not as command or tether, but as equal. "We have faced darkness," he said softly, "and we have survived. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Alara smiled faintly, the first true smile in weeks. She felt the strength in her chest, the pulse of power within her, and the quiet, unwavering presence of the Lycan king at her side. For the first time, she did not fear the future. She welcomed it. The forest below shimmered with the last traces of shadow magic, retreating into the hidden corners of the world. The curse still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. The debt remained, but it no longer bound her entirely. And the bond with Kale, the fierce, powerful, and commanding Lycan king, was no longer defined by obligation, but by choice, trust, and shared understanding. The castle seemed to breathe with them, alive and eternal. The trials were over, but the story was far from finished. Alara was ready. Kale was ready. And together they would face whatever came next, not as master and omega, but as allies, equals, and survivors of a darkness that had sought to consume them both. As the sun fully rose, painting the world in light and promise, Alara took a deep breath. She felt the warmth of life, the power within, and the bond beside her. She had survived the ritual, faced the curse, defeated the enemies, and endured the debt. And in that moment she realized something extraordinary. Freedom, courage, and the choice to define her own fate were hers, and hers alone. Kale watched her, his silver eyes reflecting the rising sun. "The debt is yours to carry," he said, "but I choose to share it with you." Always. Alara's chest swelled with emotion, her heart steady and strong. The darkness had tested them, but it had also forged them. And as they stood together, bathed in sunlight, she understood that the true power of survival was not in escaping fear, but in facing it, and choosing hope, courage, and connection over despair. The wind carried the whispers of the forest, the echoes of magic, and the promise of a new beginning. The Lycan king and the Omega he had saved stood together, ready to face whatever trials awaited them. The debt was real. The curse was real. But so was their strength, and so was the bond they had forged in darkness and light. And with that, the story of survival, trust, and transformation reached its conclusion, not as an end, but as a beginning.